good to see you this morning, and I'm going to ask you to turn your Bibles to Mark 7. If you weren't here last week, Jason Gregory was voted and accepted as being the new student director here at Heritage. He'll be moving here with his bride Kelsey in the middle of July. Who moves to Florida in the middle of July? I did. I thought I was being transported to a different region of the netherworld, and coming from the Northeast and coming here when it was 1,000,000 degrees. But they will be coming. We'll let you know some ways you can help them in the weeks ahead. The title of our series has been Faith Inhibitors. And all through the book of Mark, we have been noticing in our exposition of Mark that Jesus has been doing miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle and teaching like nobody ever taught. And there were people that weren't getting it and weren't coming to faith. And even his own disciples that he called and were walking with him, right? These 12 special men, they got a little bit and then they kind of fell back and they get a little bit more. But Jesus would keep on saying, don't you understand yet? Or, I'll go King James on you, O ye of little faith. And so much so that in Mark 6, it says, and Jesus was marveling at their unbelief. Like all of this, and they just don't get it yet. I wonder how many times he says that about us. All of this, and they just don't get it yet. All of this, and they still struggle with faith. And so how Mark lays his book out is that in chapter 7 and chapter 8, he talks about, well, what inhibits people? We know from the sovereign grace of God that God engenders faith in the hearts of people, but why do people reject? Why is it on a practical, everyday level that we struggle believing? Okay? And so we've looked at that, and we saw, first of all, in the first 13 verses of chapter 7, it was legalistic tradition. The Pharisees had God in the box. He was there for what they wanted him for. And in their mind, if the Messiah came, he was going to look a lot like them and want to hang out with them. We found out that wasn't true. And when Jesus didn't do what they thought he was going to do and hang who he thought they were going to hang with, their response was disbelief. And then religious intimidation. We saw that in the next section of chapter 7 in verse 14, talking about the disciples being intimidated by the legalists of the day. And it is hard, if you spend time with legalists, not to be intimidated by them. They are intimidation masters. So much so that when he said something that would offend the Pharisees, he said, don't you understand the Pharisees are going to be offended by that? And of course, Jesus is thinking, you can't not offend these people. But that was something that was hindering them from coming to full belief in Christ. And then spiritual alienation. We saw the Syrophoenician woman, that she was outside of the promise of God, right? Because she wasn't a Jew. And Jesus' ministry as he came was primarily to the Jewish nation, to the Jews first. And then he was going to open the door to the Gentiles. And we're seeing that here in the book of Mark. And then this morning we're going to get to this issue of limitation. There's limitations that we have in life. And so you know what the limitations are, right? You have many limitations in your life that you go through. We all struggle with limitations. And so there are physical limitations, right? Some of you can't lift 300 pounds. Some of you can't hit a drive like Mike can, 295 yards down the middle on command. Some of you just physically, we can't do some things, right? We're not good at them, and we have physical limitations. You understand that in life. And so we have physical limitations. We have limitations because we're human, right? We have all sorts of limitations. And the limitations we're going to look here at are two of them. Two limitations that we're limited in what we can do. And so we're either in a position that we're going to have to trust someone else to help us out, or we're going to go without. And so first of all, we have this story here of this person who was deaf and dumb. All right, deaf and dumb. We see that in verse 31. Now, what we see here is he's in Tyre and Sidon, which is the northern coast of north of Israel, okay? That's a Gentile area. Jesus has been ministering there. This is where the Syrophoenician woman came and talked to him, and he ministered to her in a Gentile area. The reason Jesus is in a Gentile area is because he's getting a lot of pushback from the Jewish religious leaders, so he wants to get away from that for a while, and he wants to spend some R&R with his disciples who have been on a mission, and they haven't been able to download yet. So let's get away somewhere where they don't know me. He's well known in Palestine, but they don't know me in other regions. I'll go there, and when dogging us, and we can spend some time, and I can teach you all and bring you all along, because you're obviously struggling with some faith issues. And so he goes up to Tyre, and he ministers there. And now he's going to leave Tyre, and he's going to go south. But if he goes south, he's going to go right through Galilee, which is where the Jews are. So he doesn't go south. He goes east. Now, you can look at this if you look at your map. But he goes east, and he goes on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, then he goes south. This wasn't necessarily the safest trip for a rabbi to make, but he made it anyway. So now he goes south to the Decapolis region. The Decapolis region is beyond the Jordan region, okay? And this was Gentile area. Now, there was some influence by the Jews because they lived next door to them. It's kind of like, if you live near North Carolina, you may not speak with their accent, but you're familiar with it. And so, you live near a place, but they were beyond the Jordan. They're still in a Gentile area, okay? And so he gets there. Look at verse 31. And they get there to go around the Sea of Galilee to the Decapolis. It's a region, okay? It's like Polk County, if you want an outback place. Like somewhere, it's a county. It's not a city, it's a county. 10 means 10 cities, so it's a series, 10 major cities in the area. Kind of like you go to Minneapolis, St. Paul, they call it the Twin Cities, right? So it's 10-city area. It's a big county here. Jesus goes there. And he makes his way down there. And when he got there, guess what? Someone recognized him. Do you ever go somewhere you don't want to be recognized? No, I'm not talking about those types of places. I mean, you just want to relax and get some R&R, and all of a sudden, oh, you're here. I have 59 theological questions I've always wanted to ask you. You just want to break. And so they find out he's there, and they bring someone to him. Watch this. The text says, and this is under the sickness confirmed what he had. And they brought him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment, and they begged him to lay his hands on him. Now, by the way, the man probably wasn't born deaf, because if he was born deaf, he wouldn't be able to speak, okay? So probably he was born maybe with a hearing problem. He has lost his hearing since, so his speech was rudimentary at first, and then when he lost his hearing, he could kind of make noises and speak a little bit, but no one could really understand him. That's kind of the condition that this young man is in, okay? So he's in there. Now, Jesus gets there again. He just wants some R&R, and he's not getting his R&R. It's like, and I can imagine the disciples going, really? Seriously? We just wanted to spend some time talking to Jesus, and now these people show up. You've been there before. You wanted to spend a nice afternoon doing whatever, and a knock comes on the door, and you open up, and there's a smiling face saying, hey, you want to talk? Which usually means, do you want to listen? And so, okay, well, there goes my plans for the day. But Jesus didn't react like that when that happened. Jesus didn't see these things as impositions. He saw things as opportunities. So he sees this opportunity, this man, and they want him to lay hands because that's what they do, right? And by the way, if you go back early when Jesus was with the Gadarene demoniac in the same area, he had laid hands. This is how it was a physical action. This is how healers worked in those cultures. They would do something physical. If you went to, today it's more in the natural realm of a doctor, so I'll pick on Greg again. And if I go to Greg and he's my PA and I walk in and he's going to take my temperature, I'm going to expect some physical activity. He's not going to look at me, I feel like you're a 101.2 a time. You're not going to do that, right? It's going to be something physical he's going to do. And so a physical healer would do something, and so this is what they're asking. And they had heard about him. Oh, this is the one, yeah, we had heard about him. Everywhere he goes, he lays hands on people and they get healed. Now, these are people who are Gentiles. They don't know who Jesus is. They just know people get sick, they go to Jesus, and they're better. Right? Usually when you're getting a referral to a doctor, you want to know, how does he do? Especially when we have a serious issue like cancer, you want to say, well, who deals with a cancer like this? Because I'd like to go there because they've had some success. That make sense? And so all we know about this one is you go and he heals you and they leave. And so they bring him this man. And he is, again, deaf. He can't speak. Now Jesus, everyone's there. Jesus, watch this, takes him aside. He's going to deal, this isn't the traveling healing show where Jesus wants a lot of attention, okay? This is, I want to deal with this person as an individual. This person's been a marked person their whole life. He wants to take him aside. I'm assuming that some of the disciples went aside with him and maybe a couple of family members. The disciples, because this is written down, and we know that Mark got most of his information from his good friend Peter, and so he got his information there to write his gospel. And also there was some family there, seemingly, because he tells them, those people, not to go and talk about this with other people. So this is the situation, this is circumstance, okay? And he takes him aside from the crowd privately, and he put his fingers into his ears. It's like sign language. Hey, here's what I'm going to do. Now, this sounds a little gross. Then he spit on his and touched his tongue. Some of you germphobes, that just weirded you right out of here, right? But he does that. And he's basically talking sign language. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to loosen your tongue, and I'm going to fix your ears. So he can't say it out, well, he could say it out loud, but the guy's not going to understand him. Here's what I'm going to do. You can't help yourself. You can't get rid of this deafness. You can't all of a sudden make yourself speak clearly, but I can, and I will. You can imagine what's rising up in the heart of this person. That's a little strange what he's doing, but is he communicating somehow he's going to heal me? Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. What's happening? Well, he's dealing with disciples who don't hear him well, who need to grow in their ability to understand. They can't communicate well the gospel because they don't quite get it yet. And so this is the situation. And so he does this whole series with this deaf and mute man. He doesn't do it with other people. Now remember, every miracle we've witnessed so far, from the calming of the storm to bringing Jairus' daughter back to life to the healing of the Syrophoenician's daughter, there was no arm waving, no incantation, no religious mumbo jumbo. That's not what he's doing here, okay? That's not the picture. He obviously doesn't need to perform a ritual in order to summon the power. He is power. Jesus is doing this not because he needs it, but because this man needs it. See, he's ministering to this man. It's not about, hey, look at me. That's already been settled. He took him aside. It's not, look at me. I want to minister to you. Don't you love that Jesus ministers to you? He ministers to you in a very personal and many times private way that has public implications. He knows the need of your heart. He knew the need of this man. He identifies with this man. He touches him. Don't be afraid. I'm going to do something about that. And then he kind of sighs and looks to heaven. Let's look at God. And he comes into the man's world, uses his language, nonverbal, gets his attention. He's deaf. And what does he do? Well, you know what he does. This is what Jesus does. He heals, right? He kind of sighs, kind of all right, God, this is, I'm bringing this to you again. And he says, be open. Ephphatha is what the word is. By the way, the reason it's translated there is because he spoke in Aramaic. This was an Aramaic term he was using, right? But they translates that term, as Mark retells the story, he translates that term, that word, you might not know what that word means, because he's writing it in Greek, right? You remember that in Palestine they spoke Aramaic, okay? So they're speaking Aramaic, but when they wrote down what everyone said and what happened in the New Testament, they wrote it in Greek because that was the common language of the day, and they wanted to get that message to the common person. And so there's some words that it's not really translatable, or I don't have a word for it, so he's just saying be open. What be open? Well, the ears be open. Maybe the tongue would be loosed, and that's what's going on here. And then it's cured. And his ears were what? He could hear. He probably recognized that because he's heard before, right? If he was deaf, maybe later on in life. He could hear, and his tongue was released, and he spoke clearly. By the way, some of us still need this miracle. He could speak clearly. Incredible. Again, in this pagan area, and he heals this man. And look what it says here. This is so incredible. Watch this. Jesus charged them to tell anyone. Now, we dealt with this before, haven't we? What is he saying? Listen, I'm not on a popular, trying a populist mission here where I get a lot of attention outside of, in a realm where you don't understand. With the Jews, if I'm making signs, it's because to substantiate I'm Messiah, and they'd understand I'm Messiah. But I never really will be full-fledged Messiah until I die and rise again. But this is who I am. In a Gentile era, they had no messianic hope, no messianic concept. And so for them to run around and talk about this, it's just going to be a healing mission. I don't want that. I don't want that. So don't tell. Now, this isn't reverse psychology. This isn't Jesus wants everyone to know, so he tells them not to say anything, knowing they will. That's not what's going on here. And what do the people do? Well, the people do what you would have done. What do you would have done? Hey, that guy over there, remember lived down the street down here when he was a kid. He lost his hearing. And then, it's just been a tragic series of events in his life. He went to a healer and he healed him. Where is he? I want to take someone. I got someone in my family. Have anyone in your family was sick? If you have someone in your family was sick and someone's healing everyone of every disease, you take them. As a matter of fact, people take family members to something like this, even when it isn't working, hoping it will. So they talk about it. Now notice the text. It says, they were, verse 37, they were astonished beyond measure. That's their congregational response. They were astonished. The people were there just went, whoa, wow. There's two Greek words put together, thaumazo and the word ek, which intensifies it. So it's like they're like crazy astonished, beyond measure. To use a popular political term today, they were mega astonished. Like big time astonished. Like I never expected to see something like that happen. You ever been there? Not often, because you don't expect things like that. That's okay. A number of years ago, there were a group of us, the Green Boys and a couple of us, we went to the Monterey Peninsula to play golf. And so we're playing golf, a bunch of us out there, and I saw golf shots that really, if there were cameras there, they would have been like that. No one can hit a ball like that. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes numerous times, Alan, I'd never seen anyone take a full swing at a ball and have the ball go straight up and come straight down. It's not with a wedge, like with a wood. And I'm like, no one's ever done that before, ever. In fact, Alan did it one time on number 17 at Spyglass, and he thought no one saw him. And when he did it, he looked around like, I'm going to hit it really fast. And then he looks over at me, and I had fallen down on the ground laughing. And I said, I will tell that story to the day I die. But on that trip, we had a fellow, many know the Leonards, and Walt was with us. And one of the hardest holes on Pebble Beach is number 8. It's just an impossible hole. And so he hits his drive on the edge of this cliff, and he hits a scalding 3-wood, and he sculls it. And so it just goes, it's going really low, but it's the green's way down there. And it hits about 200 yards short of the green, bink, 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 in. Remember that? Like, whoa, didn't see that baby coming. Not the way Walt was playing. Yeah, I didn't see that coming. And that's kind of like, we didn't see this coming. This is amazing. And look at, they were astonished. And then it says, he's done all things what? Well. Kind of reminds you that when Jesus was creating in Genesis 1, 2, and 3, it says, and it was good. He does everything well. It doesn't say he does most things well. We're so impressed with this one. Everything he does well. So well that the deaf and the mute are being healed. Amazing. And now, what this man couldn't do for himself, the Lord did for him. By the way, if you know Christ as your Lord and Savior, he's done that for you. What you couldn't do for yourself, he's done for you. You couldn't save yourself. You couldn't regenerate yourself. You couldn't even give yourself faith. He's done that for you. By the way, so who deserves all the honor and glory for it? He does. He does. Well, then, Mark goes on and says, going to talk about another limitation. How about a physical one? And he goes to the story of the feeding of the 4,000. These can get mixed up sometimes, feeding of the 5,000, feeding of the 4,000. But these are the limitations, in a physical need. If you don't have any food and you're hungry, you're going to need food. You can't create food if say you're in the wilderness somewhere and all you have is you, yourself, and you. You get out there, you don't have any food. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. You can't create food. Now, what's interesting to me is if you listen to what was being read by Molly this morning, it's kind of similar to the feeding of the 5,000. Feeding of the 5,000. Some scholars have said, well, really it's a kind of telling the same story twice, just in a different way, because he had a different point to make. And I mean, after all, both occasions there were a large number of people. Both occasions they're in a wilderness area. Both occasions Jesus had compassion on the people. On both occasions the disciples had doubt and they were overwhelmed by the need. On both occasions he asked the disciples how much food they had. On both occasions he multiplied bread and fish, and on both occasions they had a lot of food left over. So it's just kind of retelling the same story to make a different point. Now, is that the case? Well, no. There are some differences. As a matter of fact, in Mark 6 is where Mark 6 and Mark 8, the two stories. In Mark 6, the feeding of the 5,000, they had been with him for one day, listening to him teach. In this occasion, they've been listening to him for 3 days. Can you imagine that, for instance? I'm not going to let you go this morning at 10:30. You say, good, because it's already past 10:30. I'm not going to let you go at 11:30. I'm not going to let you go at 1:30. As a matter of fact, I'm going to teach for 3 days. How many are in? By the way, doing all things well meant he taught well, too. You got to teach well if you're going to listen that long. And so after 3 days, hey, these people are kind of hungry. Maybe it was an occasion where some of them brought some food and they figured it was going to be a day or two thing, and now they're out of food. They travel quite a bit of ways. I don't know. In the first account in Mark 6, there were 5 loaves, and in here there were how many? 7 loaves, yeah. And in Mark 6, there were 5,000 men, not counting women and children. In Mark 8, there's 4,000 people total. Okay, so we'll probably have in the Mark 6 account maybe somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people eating. In here, there's 4,000. So it's even a completely different amount. But what's interesting, in Mark 6, they were in a Jewish area on the other side of the lake, and now they're in a Gentile area. So they're in completely different locations. And in one time, they had 12 baskets left over, and this time there were how many? 7 baskets left over, but way more food. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, I'll tell you that in a minute. Okay. And by the way, another reason I know that it's 2 different occasions, if you look ahead, and we'll see this next week, because he's talking about when they're on their way in the boat, and Jesus going to start talking about the Pharisaical impact of teaching and how it leavens everything, and you can't just put a little legalism in there with some good theology. It's going to mess the whole thing up. And the Pharisees overhear him and say, oh, we forgot the bread. He's talking about leaven. He forgot the bread. And so Jesus is going to respond to him. We'll see it next week, but look what he says. Verse 17. Why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? It's interesting he's doing this miracle about seeing, right? Or hearing, because he's going to, around hearing, they're not hearing and they're not seeing. Well, the miracle that precedes this is a miracle of hearing, and the miracle that follows it is a miracle of seeing. And so it's kind of Mark sandwiches this account, these 2 miracles, to say to spiritually see and to spiritually hear, it's going to take some divine miracles in your heart. But look what he says. Don't you remember when I broke the what? 5 loaves for the 5,000. How many baskets did you pick up? 12. And when the 7 for the 4,000. But you know what? You know who thought it was 2 different occasions? Jesus. Jesus thought it was two different occasions, so guess what? It is. Okay, so now we have an occasion in a Gentile area, and we're going to see a couple things. First of all, the need acknowledged. There's an acknowledgement of the need. Obviously, you can't meet a need if you don't know what the need is and don't acknowledge it. And by the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but Isaiah 35, 5 and 6, and in a messianic context, talks about, Isaiah says, he will make the deaf hear and the mute speak. And so he's fulfilling that messianically. In those days, there was a great crowd gathered, and they had nothing to eat. Now, I'm going to assume nothing. They probably didn't have much. And he called the disciples to him and said, I have compassion on the crowd. This is a key word, right? I'm moved inside. I have this compassionate sense, this compassionate feeling, right? It means to be moved in the inside to action. We've seen this word many times in the book of Mark. It's one of his favorite words. But they would describe what was going on emotionally with their gut, not with their heart. To a Hebrew, the heart was part of the decision-making process of a person. Thinking and decision-making, that's the heart, okay? That's why you have to believe in your heart. We go like this, right? Yeah, I know it's confusing. So when we talk about our feelings, we usually talk about what? Our heart. But when the Hebrews talked about the feelings, they talked about their gut, right? And by the way, usually when you have these crazy feelings, you feel them where? In your gut. Yeah, I was really upset. I got an upset heart. No, you probably got an upset stomach. Why? Because the emotions affect your gut. That's why when your husband comes home in a bad mood, before you tell him that you just buried the car in the lake, you feed the dude, right? Once you feed him, he's a little less, apt to go off the charts, and then you tell him, the car's in the lake, and then he goes off the charts. Anyway, move with compassion. We've seen this word over and over and over. We're moved inside to do something. And that's what, by the way, we should be moved as we look at our culture. We can get angry as we look at our culture, but we should be moved with compassion. Why? Because if it weren't for the grace of God in your life, these weird views that people have out there, you'd have them too. Do you think you are who you are because of you, honestly? Do you think you are where you are by the grace of God? Are you shocked that depraved people in our culture are acting depraved? Is that shocking you at all? Jesus saw needs and he had compassion. He has compassion. And compassion, he's moved to do something about it. And so here we see the need analyzed. Look at it. In verse 4, his disciples answered him. He said, these people come, we don't have anything to eat. What are we going to do? I don't want to send them away hungry. It's a long trip. They might faint. They might get sick. I mean, come on. And his disciples answered and said, hey, I remember a time about 5 months ago you did this. Could you do it again? Is that what they did? I mean, that's what you do. You say, wait, it was just a couple chapters ago. Okay, in their life, it was 5 to 6 months ago. But 5 to 6 months ago, God came through. He met the need. You're great at this. Is this another one you're going to do now? Don't you think so? I wonder, was anyone even thinking that? No one said anything, but was anyone thinking that? Well, it reminds me of a circumstance, even though there are a different amount of people and different fish. Maybe you're going to do something. I mean, we just in the boat and you just calm the storm. And nothing, crickets. But they said, well, how can we do this? Notice how can we do? You're looking at us to feed the crowd? By the way, the answer would be no. I'm looking at you to trust me to feed the crowd. Got it? I'm not looking for you to feed the crowd. I'm looking for you to trust me to feed the crowd. I'm not looking to you to convert people to Christianity. I'm looking to you to trust me to convert people to Christianity, and the way he does it is through the preaching of the gospel. I want you to do that. Got it? Yeah. But before too hard in disguise, and they can't remember 5 or 6 months ago, how many times has God ministered in your life in a crazy way, and then you forget about it later? Can't believe they're not remembering now. Well, what are you forgetting when you don't trust God? We're guilty too, aren't we? We can do the same thing. We can be guilty on I mean, we could be guilty on a ministry level. Some of you, when they get up here and say, we're going to start doing this, you're thinking, oh, I wonder what the ask is this time. Well, God's met every need, yeah, but I mean, there's a limit to, and I know because I'm sitting there too. Now, by the way, through the wisdom of the elders and godly people, we've built into the budget things that we can do these things and not have to come to congregation for everything. That's wonderful. But God's going to meet the need anyway, isn't he? He does that. That's how God works. You think someone would have said, you're incredible at times like this. Can't wait to see how you're going to deal with this, Lord. No, not that. We can do this. Some of you can think back. Not all of you can think back this long, but there's a couple of you in here that can think back to almost 50 years ago and got this land out by faith, and what are we going to do? We've got to build a building. How are we going to pay for that? God will do that. And we got to build another building. How are we going to do that? God can do that, and he did. And we built this building just before I came, and God could do that and paid for it, and he did. And I'm sure everyone said, well, I'm never going to doubt God again. Well, not until we want a family life center. We're going to build that. Well, the financial hard times hit, and now how are we going to do it? Well, God can do that, and God did do it. So we'll never going to doubt God again. Even financially bad time doesn't hinder the God of the universe, does it? And then all people started having kids. We got all these little kids running around church, and we need to start retrofitting buildings, or we retrofit the old office building into a nursery, and the preschool, or the age school into a preschool, and then we finally get done with this one, and we're going to do that in COVID. What moron does that during COVID? And God met the need, and so we say, well, I'm never going to doubt again. Well, no, not until we need 2 roofs and a redone worship center. I mean, we do the same thing, don't we? So you can read these guys. Oh, these guys are really dull, and well, we need to learn from this. I mean, these things are written for our admonition that we could have hope. Well, these guys they're working out people, and so you know what they're doing? They got their paper out. I don't know if you're type A. You got the paper out. So okay, Mike Green has a loaf, and Ethan has a loaf, and Scott had a loaf, but he ate it all by himself when he came in. And you're kind of writing all this stuff down, right? So, well, we got 7 loaves, and we got a couple sardines. And she's like, you missed point. You missed it by like a mile. And so Jesus acts, right? Jesus acts. What does he do? Well, what you expect him to do. It's like 7, and it's almost like I'm wondering if Jesus is going to say, don't you remember the last time I didn't know? I'm just going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. Now, if you're a teacher, you get this. Especially if you're a math teacher. And you deal with that evil thing called calculus. That's a tool of Satan to destroy students' confidence. And so they write out the proof, and they get it done, and the prof is up there, and they're writing it on the board, and doesn't that make sense? And they're nodding. And so, by the way, when someone's nodding, you nod. So you're going like this. You're not going like this because you understand. You're going like this because you're nodding. You got it? And everyone's going, okay, your turn.